Suck my dick, Jake. Hey, kids. This is section 2 of part 1 of Anton Pannekoek's Workers' Councils. Part 1 of the book is titled The Task. The last section that I read in a separate video was titled Labor. This section is titled Law and Property. I could read each of these parts as one big whole, but I feel like people enjoy a smaller video, you know? And I do too. So I'm kind of just reading these section by section. And I think they're long enough where it's not going to be terribly tedious to like upload a bunch of them. One time when I was uploading a bunch of entries from In Defense of Marxism by Leon Trotsky, some of the videos were like seriously like 2 minutes long, and it was like I should have just read these in bulk. But there's a happy medium, right? There's a, between the 2-minute videos and I think that's the shortest videos are like probably like 2 minutes, and the longest video I have is like 8 hours long, which I definitely should have cut down into something more manageable. The 8-hour video was the immediate results of the production process by Marx. The missing, 6th chapter or whatever from Capital. I don't know, actually, it might be a different number chapter that's missing, I might be saying the title wrong, but it's about, the real and formal subsumption of labor. Anyway, here we are, Section 2, Law and Property. Such a change in the system of labor implies a change of law, not, of course, that new laws must first be enacted by Parliament or Congress. It concerns changes in the depth of society, in the customs and practice of society, far beyond the reach of such temporary things as parliamentary acts. It relates to the fundamental laws, not of one country only, but of human society, founded on man's convictions of right and justice. These laws are not immutable. To be sure, the ruling classes at all times have tried to perpetuate the existing law by proclaiming that it is based on nature, founded on the eternal rights of man, sanctified by religion. This is for the sake of upholding their prerogatives and dooming the exploited classes to perpetual slavery. Historical evidence, on the contrary, shows that law continually changed in line with the changing feelings of right and wrong. The sense of right and wrong, the consciousness of justice in men, is not accidental. The sense of right and wrong, the consciousness of justice in men, grows up irresistibly by nature out of what men experience as the fundamental conditions of their life. Society must live, so the relations of men must be regulated in such a way. It is this that law provides for, that the production of life necessities may go on unimpeded. Right is what is essentially good and necessary for life, not only useful for the moment, but needed generally, not for the life of single individuals, but for people at large, for the community, not for personal or temporal interests, but for the common and lasting weal. If the life conditions change, if the system of production develops into new forms, the relations between men change, their feeling of what is right or wrong changes with them, and the law has to be altered. This is seen most clearly in the laws regulating the right of property. In the original savage and barbarian state, the land was considered as belonging to the tribe that lived on it, hunting or pasturing. Expressed in our terms, we should say that the land was common property of the tribe that used the land for that tribe's living and defended the land against other tribes. The self-made weapons and tools were accessories of the individual, hence were a kind of private property, though not in our conscious and exclusive sense of this word, in consequence of the strong mutual bonds amongst the tribesmen. Not laws, but use and custom regulated their mutual relations. Such primitive peoples, even agricultural peoples in later times, as the Russian peasants before 1860, could not conceive the idea of private ownership of a tract of land, just as we cannot conceive the idea of private ownership of a quantum of air. Their regulations had to change when the tribes settled and expanded, cleared the forest and dissolved into separate individuals, i.e. families, each working a separate lot. They changed still more when handicrafts separated from agriculture, when from the casual work of all, it became the continual work of some, when the products became commodities to be sold in regular commerce and to be consumed by others than the producers. It is quite natural that the farmer who worked a piece of land, who improved that piece of land, who did his work at his own will, without interference from others, had the free disposal of the land and the tools, that the produce was his, that land and produce were his property. Restrictions might be needed for defense in medieval times in the form of possible feudal obligations. It is quite natural that the artisan, as the only one who handled his tools, had the exclusive disposal of them, as well as of the things he made, that he was the sole owner. Thus private ownership became the fundamental law of a society founded on small-scale working units. Without being expressly formulated, it was felt as a necessary right that whoever exclusively handled the tools, the land, the product, must be master of them, must have the free disposal of them. Private ownership of the means of production belongs as its necessary juridical attribute to small trade. It remained so when capitalism came to be master of industry. It was even more consciously expressed, and the French Revolution proclaimed liberty, equality, and property the fundamental rights of the citizen. It was private ownership of the means of production simply applied, when, instead of some apprentices, the master craftsman hired a larger number of servants to assist him, to work with his tools and to make products for him to sell. By means of exploiting the labor power of the workers, the factories and machines as private property of the capitalist became the source of an immense and ever-growing increase of capital. Here private ownership performed a new function in society. As capitalist ownership, private ownership ascertained power and increasing wealth to the new ruling class, the capitalists, and enabled the capitalists strongly to develop the productivity of labor and to expand their rule over the earth. So this juridical institute, notwithstanding the degradation and misery of the exploited workers, was felt as a good and beneficent, even necessary institution, promising an unlimited progress of society. This development, however, gradually changed the inner character of the social system, and thereby again the function of private ownership changed. With the joint stock companies, the twofold character of the capitalist factory owner, that of directing the production and that of pocketing the surplus value, is splitting up. Labor and property, in olden times intimately connected, are now separated. Owners are the shareholders, living outside the process of production, idling in distant country houses and maybe gambling at the exchange. A shareholder has no direct connection with the work. His property does not consist in tools for him to work with. His property consists simply in pieces of paper, in shares of enterprises of which he does not even know the whereabouts. His function in society is that of a parasite. His ownership does not mean that he commands and directs the machines. This is the sole right of the director. It means only that he may claim a certain amount of money without having to work for that money. The property in hand, his shares, are certificates showing his right, guaranteed by law and government, by courts and police, to participate in the profits, titles of companionship in the large society for exploitation of the world, that is capitalism. The work in the factories goes on quite apart from the shareholders. Here the work director and the staff have the care all day to regulate, to run about, to think of everything. The workers are working and toiling from morning till evening, hurried and abused. Everybody has to exert himself to the utmost to render the output as large as possible, but the product of their common work is not for those who did the work. Just as in olden times burgesses were ransacked by gangs of wayside robbers, so now people entirely foreign to the production come forward and, on the credit of their papers, as registered owners of a share scrip, seize the chief part of the produce, not violently, Without having to move as much as a finger, they find it put on their banking account automatically. Only a poor wage or a moderate salary is left for those who together did the work of production. All the rest is dividend taken by the shareholders. Is this madness? It is the new function of private ownership of the means of production. It is simply the praxis of old inherited law, applied to the new forms of labor to which it does no longer fit. Here we see how the social function of a juridical institute, in consequence of the gradual change of the forms of production, turns into the very reverse of its original aim. Private ownership, originally a means to give everybody the possibility of productive work, now is turned into the means to prevent the workers from the free use of the instruments of production. Originally a means to ascertain to the workers the fruits of the workers' labor, it now turned into a means to deprive the workers of the fruits of their labor for the benefit of a class of useless parasites. How is it, then, that such obsolete law still holds sway over society? First, because the numerous middle class and small business people, the farmer and independent artisans, cling to it, in the belief that it assures them their small property and their living, but with the result that often, with their mortgaged holdings, they are the victims of usury and bank capital. When saying, "I am my own master," they mean, "I have not to obey a foreign master." Community in work as collaborating equals lies far outside their imagination. Secondly, and chiefly, however, because the power of the state, with the power of the state's police and military force, upholds old laws for the benefit of the ruling class, the capitalists. In the working class, now, the consciousness of this contradiction is arising as a new sense of right and justice. The old right, through the development of small trade into big business, has turned into wrong, and it is felt as a wrong. It contradicts the obvious rule that those who do the work and handle the equipment must dispose of it in order to arrange and execute the work in the best way. The small tool, the small lot could be handled and worked by a single person with his family, so that person had the disposal of it, with the owner, the big machines. So the person had the disposal of it, was the owner. The big machines, the factories, the large enterprises can only be handled and worked by an organized body of workers, a community of collaborating forces. So this body, the community, must have the disposal of it in order to arrange the work according to their common will. The common ownership does not mean an ownership in the old sense of the word, as the right of using or misusing at will. Each enterprise is, but part, the total productive apparatus of society. So the right of each body or community of producers is limited by the superior right of society and has to be carried out in regular connection with the others. Common ownership must not be confounded with public ownership. In public ownership, often advocated by notable social reformers, the state or another political body is master of the production. The workers are not masters of the workers' work. The workers are commanded by the state officials who are leading and directing the production. Whatever may be the conditions of labor, however human and considerate the treatment, the fundamental fact is that not the workers themselves, but the officials dispose of the means of production, dispose of the product, manage the entire process, decide what part of the produce shall be reserved for innovations, for wear, for improvements, for social expenses, what part has to fall to the workers, what part to themselves. In short, the workers still receive wages, a share of the product determined by the masters. Under public ownership of the means of production, the workers are still subjected to and exploited by a ruling class. Public ownership is a middle-class program of a modernized and disguised form of capitalism. Public ownership is a middle-class program of a modernized and disguised form of capitalism. Common ownership by the producers can be the only goal of the working class. Thus, the revolution of the system of production is intimately bound up with a revolution of law. It is based on a change in the deepest convictions of right and justice. Each production system consists in the application of a certain technique, combined with a certain law regulating the relations of men in their work, fixing their rights and duties. The techniques of small tools combined with private ownership means a society of free and equal competing small producers. The techniques of big machines combined with private ownership means capitalism. The techniques of big machines combined with common ownership means a free collaborating humanity. Thus, capitalism is an intermediate system, a transitional form resulting from the application of the old law to the new techniques. While the technical development enormously increased the powers of man, the inherited law that regulated the use of these powers subsisted nearly unchanged. No wonder that it proved inadequate, that society fell to such distress. This is the deepest sense of the present world crisis. Mankind simply neglected in time to adapt its old law to its new technical powers. Therefore, it now suffers ruin and destruction. A technique is a given power. To be sure, technique's rapid development is the work of man, the natural result of thinking over the work, of experience and experiment, of exertion and competition. But once established, its application is automatic. Outside our free choice, imposed like a given force of nature, we cannot go back, as poets have wished, to the general use of the small tools of our forefathers. Law, on the other hand, must be instituted by a man with conscious design. Such as it is established, law determines freedom or slavery of man towards man and toward his technical equipment. When inherited law, in consequence of the silent growth of techniques, has turned into a means of exploitation and oppression, inherited law becomes an object of contest between the social classes, the exploiting and exploited class. So long as the exploited class dutifully acknowledges existing law as right and justice, so long its exploitation remains lawful and unchallenged. When then, gradually in the masses arises a growing consciousness of their exploitation, at the same time new conceptions of right awaken in them. With the growing feeling that existing law is contrary of justice, their will is roused to change it and to make their convictions of right and justice the law of society. This means that the sense of being wronged is not sufficient. Only when in great masses of the workers this sense grows into such clear and deep convictions of right that they permeate the entire being, filling it with a firm determination and a fiery enthusiasm, they'll be able to develop the powers needed for revolving the social structure. Even then, this will be only the preliminary condition. A heavy and lengthy struggle to overcome the resistance of the capitalist class, defending its rule with the utmost power, will be needed to establish the new order. The end. Thank you for listening. The next section is titled Shop Organization, and that's section 3. This has been section 2.